10-Minute Murder contains depictions of actual crimes. What you are about to hear is real and violent in nature. Discretion is advised. This is 10-Minute Murder.
Welcome to 10-Minute Murder, the brief and bingeable true crime podcast. I'm Joe, the host, and thank you for being here. Before we get going, let me invite you to connect with me on social media. If you use Facebook and Instagram, you can click the link in the notes of this episode. I think I said clink. You can clink it or click it, either one. I think clicking it will get you to me. Or you can just type in 10-Minute Murder into the search bar of Facebook and Instagram, and I'll pop right up. On there, you can message me and tell me about a story you think I should do an episode on, or just let me know I'm awful. Either one of those I'm perfectly fine with. Also going forward, I'm going to commit to releasing more episodes as often as I can, and in order to make it more uniform so that you know what to count on from me, Tuesdays and Thursdays of every week, you can count on an episode of 10-Minute Murder. I usually do more than two, and I usually just release them whenever I find the time. But I just want to make it consistent so that you know when to expect them from me. So Tuesdays and Thursdays, and if I have more time, I'll sprinkle them in whenever I get a chance to. If you're new to 10-Minute Murder, be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any of those episodes. Now, let's get to today's story. Confessions of a Teenage Serial Killer. On September 4th, 1989, Marie Bouchard went to check on her daughter, Joan Heaton, and her two grandchildren, Jennifer, who was 10, and Melissa, 8, at their home in the Buttonwoods area of Warwick, Rhode Island. She was concerned because she hadn't heard from them over the Labor Day weekend. Marie's other daughter, Mary Lou, accompanied her to Joan's house. It was a visit that no matter how hard they tried, they would never forget. When they got there, they thought it was weird that no one answered the door. The car was in the driveway, so they must be home. After ringing the doorbell over and over and over, they decided to just go inside. When they entered, they immediately knew something was terribly wrong. The interior was splattered with blood, and a putrid smell permeated the air. As they walked further into the house, they saw Joan lying beneath blood-soaked sheets in the hallway. Her oldest daughter, Jennifer, was lying nearby, and Melissa was on the kitchen floor. All three had been brutally murdered. Just days earlier, Marie had spent the day with Joan and her grandchildren shopping and enjoying time together. It was hard to imagine that they were all dead. They called police, and within minutes, it was swarming with detectives. Detectives that were absolutely horrified by the brutality of the crime. It was nothing they had ever seen before. All the victims had been stabbed multiple times with kitchen knives. The youngest child, Melissa, was stabbed so fiercely that one of the blades actually broke off in her neck. She also had her skull bashed in with a kitchen stool. Apart from the 57 stab wounds inflicted on her body, Joan was also bludgeoned and strangled. It was believed that they were murdered 3 days prior to the discovery. They believed that the murder was likely someone from the Heatons' own neighborhood. In fact, detectives thought maybe the crime was possibly connected with another unsolved murder that took place 2 years earlier in Buttonwoods. The coincidences between the two crimes were significant. In July 1987, Rebecca Spencer, who was 27, was found dead in her living room. She had been stabbed repeatedly with a packing knife. At the time of her death, she was preparing to move to another neighborhood. In both the Heaton and Spencer cases, the killer used a weapon that was already present in the house. This presented strong evidence that the killer originally entered for another purpose, like to burglarize the house. It was likely that the intruder was caught unaware and murdered the eyewitnesses using whatever was convenient. Robbers often burglarize houses they know. The more familiar you are with the contents of a house, the more successful your robbery will be. The Heaton home was only 5 down from where Rebecca Spencer was killed. Something else unusual in both cases was the overkill. Joan and Rebecca were stabbed approximately 60 times, and the children approximately 30 times. Due to the excessive nature of the crimes, it was highly probable that the same person committed the murders. Because of how savagely the murders occurred, they seemed pretty sure that the killer probably injured him or herself in the knife attack. Just one day after the Heaton family was discovered, investigators caught a lucky break. 2 detectives were driving through the park near the home and spotted a familiar face, 15-year-old Craig Price. One of the detectives had coached him in recreation basketball. They stopped to talk to him, asked if he had seen anything suspicious. He told them that he lived just a few houses down from the Heatons and saw when they took the bodies from the home. While he was telling them about it, the detectives noticed a bandage on Craig's hand. He said that a few nights prior, he got drunk and put his hand through a random car window. Super sketchy to admit underage drinking and vandalism instead of just making up something less criminal. So that was a waving red flag. But the murders were so completely heartless and violent that it was hard to imagine a teenager being the killer. They checked into his story, where he said he smashed the car window and found that to be a lie. Back at the crime scene, a blood analyst determined that a size 13 foot and a bloody sock left a trail in the house. Craig Price was not an average teenager. At age 15, he already had a history of offenses, including a record of breaking and entering, theft, peeping into houses, and using drugs. He was also known to have a violent temper. Police had been called to his house on more than one occasion to settle disputes in which he was involved. Investigators decided it was time to question Craig more thoroughly. They went to Craig's house and asked him to come with his parents to the police station. During questioning, Craig was asked more detailed questions about how he cut his hand. He maintained his story. Investigators were not convinced and asked him to take a lie detector test. Let me pause for a second and say that polygraph results are generally inadmissible in court. An innocent person can and does sometimes fail a polygraph. Well, this polygraph test revealed Craig was lying. During interviews with Craig's friends and acquaintances, investigators learned that he had bragged about killing Rebecca Spencer. It was the first evidence they had connecting Craig to the murder. Investigators were quick to obtain a search warrant for his house, and police don't usually give you a heads up that they're coming out to do that. They just show up unannounced and when you're not expecting it. It can wreck your nerves when police are searching through all your belongings from top to bottom. So Craig's mom, dad, and brother were all very tense during the search. But Craig wasn't. He even fell asleep on the couch where detectives told him to sit. They found exactly what they were looking for. While searching inside the shed behind the house, a trash bag was found full of incriminating evidence. Within the bag were several bloody knives from the Heaton household, along with bloodied articles of clothing, gloves, and other objects. Investigators woke up Craig and arrested him for the murders of Joan, Jennifer, and Melissa. Surprisingly, he still seemed pretty unaffected. He was booked, then interrogated about the murders. The detectives hoped Craig would come clean about his crimes. They got more than they expected. He admitted to the Heaton murders, describing in detail how it all happened. The details make Craig's father leave the interrogation room to go throw up. He didn't come back. Craig said his primary intention was to burglarize the house. He said that he found an open window in the kitchen. He crawled through and fell on a table inside. In a state of panic when Joan woke up and discovered him, Craig said he grabbed her, then beat and strangled her. Joan's screams woke up the children, who stumbled out of their beds into the hallway. Melissa ran to the kitchen to call the police, but Craig overpowered her. Craig tackled the girls to the floor, then went to the kitchen, grabbed some knives, and began to stab them all. During the attack, one of the girls bit Craig's hand. In a fit of rage, he bit the girl back on the face. Craig also bit Joan. He smashed the youngest girl over the head with a stool when she continued to struggle. Craig said during the murders, he had accidentally stabbed his own hand. He removed the gloves he was wearing and tended to his injuries in the bathroom. He didn't realize that he left a trail of blood and sock prints behind him. When asked about Rebecca Spencer, Craig admitted that he also killed her. He was just 13 years old at the time of that murder. Craig had no difficulty remembering the details of that first murder. After his confession, the detectives were relieved, but also shocked and disgusted by the remorseless brutality. Despite the brutal murders he committed, Craig would never have to face a trial or serve actual time in prison because he confessed to those crimes just weeks before his 16th birthday. According to Rhode Island state law, all the courts could do was hold him in a training school until his 21st birthday, and no longer. Before he could be released, Craig Price was indicted on a charge of assault and extortion after threatening an officer at the detention center. He refused to submit to a psych evaluation by order of the court and was found in contempt, which added an additional year to his sentence. For the other charges, Craig was found guilty and sentenced to 15 years with 8 years suspended. While serving that time, he's been involved in several violent prison offenses, including the stabbing of another inmate in 2017, which added 25 more years to his sentence. And that's today's 10-Minute Murder, the brief and bingeable true crime podcast. Thanks for listening today. And before you go, subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. If you enjoy it, it'd be really cool if you left a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. If you have friends and you think any of them might like a true crime podcast like this one, let them know about 10-Minute Murder. Thank you for listening. Have a good night.